Hello, hello. Hello and welcome to the Hispanic-Serving Institution's Equity Talk, championing a transfer receptive culture. Welcome to our students and colleagues at San Jose City College and UC Santa Cruz. My name is Sarah Radoff. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Director of Services for Transfer and Reentry Students at UC Santa Cruz. About a year ago, our campuses were nearing the end of a 5-year Department of Education HSI Title V grant, Cultivamos Excelencia, which is a collaborative initiative designed to encourage low-income community college students and students of color to develop self-efficacy, skill development, and motivation to transfer and complete their bachelor degrees, meanwhile working internally to remove institutional barriers to their educational goals. Last year, my colleague and dear friend, Shars Hersan, the director of UC Santa Cruz HSI Initiatives, asked me, so what's the impact been of Cultivamos Excelencia? How have our campuses transformed to better serve transfer students of color? This was a critical question and an important juncture because we were at the end of a grant and beginning a phase of institutional responsibility for sustaining this important work. I had to pause on this question, and I've been reflecting on it for the past year. Valeria Alonso Blanco, the Cultivamos graduate researcher, and Saskia Casanova, psychology assistant professor, partnered with me to investigate some critical questions. How are transfer student outcomes different across race and ethnicity? What are the campus policies or practices that may create barriers or opportunities for community college transfer students of color? And which policies and practices foster a transfer receptive culture at UC Santa Cruz? We're deep in data collection now as we try to understand the institutional impact of Cultivamos Excelencia and uncover new opportunities for us as partner institutions. But there's something that I've come to know and I see already as we gather here this afternoon for this equity talk. Institutions are composed of people. And it's people who change system. It's people who write policies, enact new practices, and create culture. I believe the greatest impact of Cultivamos Excelencia has been a culture shift towards transfer sending culture at San Jose City College and transfer receptive culture at UC Santa Cruz. In guiding our understanding of culture and its relationship with education and teaching, Gloria Ladson-Billings reminds us that culture encompasses worldview, thought patterns, epistemological stances, ethics, and ways of being, along with the tangible and readily identifiable components of human groups. As we move into this new chapter of Cultivamos Excelencia, post-HSI grant and into HSI sustainability, I see colleagues across both of our campuses engaging in brave dialogue about race in higher education, trying out and adopting asset-based pedagogies in their work with historically minoritized communities, and introducing new ways of structuring campus policies and practices that are anti-racist and aim to achieve racial parity in community college transfer student outcomes. Overall, HSI is a project of learning, experimentation, culture shift, and institutional transformation. It's the work of individuals because it is individuals who change systems and participate in creating culture. I'm inspired by the number of students, staff, faculty, and administrators who've partnered with Cultivamos over the years, those who've been doing this work long before our campuses ever had a grant or an identity as an HSI, and new partners who've arrived here today to be part of cultivating transfer sending and transfer receptive cultures between San Jose City College and UC Santa Cruz. So let's get into this. First, some quick logistics for the webinar. If you're having any tech issues during this webinar, please contact my colleague Janet at 831-244-0946, or you can use the chat box to message her. You're welcome to add comments and questions into the chat, but note that we're not going to be able to respond to non-technical questions in the chat during the webinar. There will be an interactive Q&A portion where we plan to respond to live questions. This webinar has closed captioning available, which you can view by clicking the closed captioning button on your Zoom control bar. We'll have one 5-minute break at 3 p.m. We also have a website, and if you didn't grab that in the chat as you were coming in, please feel free to check it out. On our website, Valeria, if you go to the next screen, there's a QR code there that you can grab to take you there. And Janet's dropping the direct link into the chat right now. On our webpage, you're going to find our program agenda, presenter bios, worksheets, handouts, expanded data slides, and further reading for you. All right, with those logistics behind us, it is now my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our guest facilitators. Dimpal Jain is an associate professor within educational leadership and policy studies at California State University, Northridge. Her research centers on the relationship between community colleges and universities, most notably how baccalaureate granting institutions can develop and maintain a transfer receptive culture for students of color. She utilizes critical race and womanist frameworks within her scholarship to explore the transfer function, faculty femtorship, and women of color leadership. Alfred Herrera is the Assistant Vice Provost of Academic Partnerships and Director for the Center of Community College Partnerships at UC Los Angeles. Alfred's work is focused on developing academic enrichment programs dedicated to preparing underserved students to become competitively eligible for research universities and the UC system. He's a nationally renowned for his strong advocacy on behalf of transfer and undocumented students in higher education by conducting countless training and information sessions over the years. Paulina Palomino is Dean of Student Services and Transfer Champion at East LA College. She has served the community of East LA as counselor, instructional faculty, director, and administrator of numerous programs and services. The hallmark of her 32-year career has been removing barriers and creating opportunities for first-generation college students of color. Santiago Bernal is currently the Assistant Director for UCLA's Center for Community College Partnerships. He serves in numerous community college advisory boards, co-founded UCLA's Student Transfer and Opportunities Mentoring Program, and has worked extensively with community college students since 1994. He served in UCLA's LGBT Resource Center Advisory Board and has traveled internationally to conduct trainings on diversity, immigration, and higher education. And I pass it off to our facilitators.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alfred, and we are deeply appreciative of the opportunity to share our passion and our work focused on transfer, any transfer sending and receptive culture. It is an honor to be here. I'd like to thank Sarah and Elizabeth, who were the people who first contacted us to do this work. I'd like to extend a welcome to all of you from San Jose and UC Santa Cruz and anywhere else. And I do want to do a shout out to Francia, who's been blasting up the chat. Francia is, of course, one of our CCP scholars, and we're very proud of the work that she has done. And she's also from ELAC, which is where I met her when she was in our program. So thank you, Francia, for representing ELAC and UCLA CCP. So we wanted to give you an overview of the goals of this workshop. We have listed them here. Basically, we want to explore how we can further activate the 5 elements of a transfer receptive culture at UC Santa Cruz and a transfer sending culture at San Jose City College. We want to present an equity analysis of transfer pathways at both institutions, elevate the student perspectives, which are the most important voices here on transfer experiences, and allow this to serve as a catalyst for further dialogue and action planning. One of the things that's really important is that we start the discussion, but do not end it here. We want to make sure that this is an ongoing discussion. We know the work that's been done already between the 2 institutions, which is really important and impactful work. And we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for that to continue to go on at both of the institutions. The work that has already been done is a huge stepping stone to continue the work in a way that it really needs to go forward. Next slide. So just very quickly, a transfer receptive culture definition is pretty much a university commitment to support community college students of color to transfer successfully, which includes navigating the community college, so the pre-transfer kind of work, taking appropriate coursework, applying, enrolling, and successfully earning a baccalaureate degree and or moving beyond into graduate and professional school. Our work is grounded in the critical race theory in education, and it centers the experiences of race and racism in the transfer process. One of the realities is that when you look at research around transfer students, only sometimes do you find issues around race. And for us, it's really a really important center for the work that we do, because we know how important that plays into a student's ability to transfer and the work that they're able to do at a community college and ultimately then at a university like the UC. So we ground our work in CRT to ensure that that's front and center in the work, and make no apologies for talking about race and racism and institutional racism in the work that we do, because we know those are where the barriers exist for many of our students. So we're really happy to share this and continue this work. Next slide. Sarah.
Okay, so here's what you're in store for the next 3 hours. Thank you for dedicating 3 hours to spending this time with us. We're going to go over some transfer data disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Then we're going to be moving into an introduction of transfer receptive culture. We're going to have an amazing fishbowl dialogue with the senior leadership from both of our campuses and students from both campuses and alumni. There's going to be a Q&A portion where you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of all of our facilitators today. A declarations and affirmations component where we're really focused on the individual things that we want to work on and we want to see. And then there's going to be a wrap up. All right, so data. I will be going over some different transfer data disaggregated by race. And some notes about this data before I go. First off, please note that we have expanded data slides on our event website on the resources tab with additional details on transfer rates, retention and graduation, all disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Some quick notes about these data. I've sourced all of it from publicly available warehouses, and because I'm drawing from different campus data centers, demographics are sometimes counted in different ways, which really complicates comparison. In particular, community colleges and CSUs count when students identify with 2 or more races, whereas the UC Info Center does not give me that information. Also, please note that these slides do not include data related to international students or those with an unknown race or ethnicity. Also, many of the data centers state that if there are less than 5 students for a given category, the public data was not available, but then sometimes turns out it was. So you'll definitely see some places where there's maybe 1, 2, or 3 students noted. Next slide, please. So in terms of framing, it's important to know that there are well-documented inequities in community college transfer. Nationally, Black and Latinx students predominantly enter higher education through community colleges. And here in California, undergraduates attend community colleges at 14% above the national average. Yet completion rates are lower among Black students, Native American, Native Alaskan, Latinx, and Pacific Islander students, as compared to stronger completion rates from Asian, Filipino, and white students. Note that completion is defined by community college students who completed a degree, certificate, or transfer-related outcomes at the community college. When we are looking locally at transfer to UC Santa Cruz, we see these inequities as well. So take, for example, that 2018 was the only year, and I only looked at data the past 10 years, but this was the only year that UC Santa Cruz admitted more Latinx and Black transfer students than white transfer students. And still in this year, white students enrolled at the same rate as Latinx students, and Black students had a lower yield rate. In all other years, white students have been the primary beneficiaries of the community college transfer pathway into UC Santa Cruz. So this really underscores that equity issues for transfer is most prevalent in the areas of access and enrollment. So let's look at this a little bit closer. Next slide, please. This first chart illustrates admission to UC Santa Cruz from our 13 regional community colleges. You can see on the top line that Cabrillo is the highest sending community college among the regional community colleges, and that more white students will enroll at UC Santa Cruz than Latinx students. However, this is disproportionate to Cabrillo's enrollment. Demographically, Cabrillo enrolls approximately 47% white students, 40% Latinx, and 1.5% Black. Looking at Hartnell and San Jose City College, you can see that much fewer students will transfer to UC Santa Cruz from these colleges. However, they send predominantly Latinx identified students. Looking demographically at the community colleges, enrollment numbers, San Jose City College enrolls 43% Latinx, nearly 6% Black, and 14.5% white. Hartnell enrolls 60% Latinx, 2% Black, and 24% white. All three community colleges enroll less than 1% of Native American and Native Alaskan students. Next slide, please. So this next chart shows us where students from our regional community colleges transferred in 2019. And it's these data that continue to encourage us to pursue partnerships with San Jose City College. And we aspire to work with Hartnell and Cabrillo as well to work on equitable transfer access to UCs. These data reveal that the colleges are high performing in terms of transfer. However, they send low numbers of historically minoritized students to a UC. Cabrillo College sends more white students to overall to a CSU than a UC. But when disaggregated by race, we can see that white students are transferring at a higher rate to the UCs, and Latinx students are disproportionately transferring to a CSU. I do want to note that while there are a few Black students transferring from Cabrillo, Black Cabrillo students transfer to UCs at a slightly higher rate than CSUs. Hartnell and San Jose City College overwhelmingly send students from all race and ethnic groups predominantly to CSUs. Although these data suggest a strong transfer sending culture for Latinx students directed to CSU rather than UC campuses, baseline data demonstrates high potential for transfer to a UC campus. The majority of students who completed the 60 semester units required for transfer also met the UC GPA transfer requirement. Next slide, please. This slide is providing some insight into where we've been able to move the needle on access and enrollment through Cultivamos Excelencia, and where we still have some important work to do. Through activities such as cross-enrollment, where we teach UC Santa Cruz courses on site at San Jose City College, family engagement outreach and initiatives, and cross-campus counseling, we've increased admission rates and closed gaps in yield rates for those who submit a statement of intent to register and those who actually show up in the fall. In relation to closing the yield gaps, one student explained, "I was completely lost with the process of transferring to UCSC. However, the Cultivamos Excelencia program was supportive and encouraging. I honestly would not know what to do without the workshops. They helped me figure out everything from commuting to scheduling my classes." And although more students are applying and getting admitted, why are admitted students not choosing UCSC? This is a question for us to solve in partnership as transfer sending and transfer receiving institutions. And for this last slide, I want to underscore that while prevalent, equitable transfer is not just about access and enrollment. In her research on organizational identities of Hispanic-serving institutions, Gina Garcia calls on HSIs to produce an equitable number of legitimized outcomes and enact a culture that is educationally enhancing and welcoming. Through Cultivamos Excelencia, we've also focused on creating this culture and climate for SJCC transfer students who are predominantly students of color. We're proud of our SJCC students' high retention rates, graduation rates, and strong GPAs, well above the campus averages. And we're proud of the sense of community, family inclusion, and welcoming culture that we've taken responsibility for creating here at UC Santa Cruz. So we're looking forward to opportunities to scale up our efforts and create more impact across campus and with our community college partners. While transfer students at UCSC have higher retention and graduation rates than students who enter as first-year students, when we disaggregate that by race, it is apparent that as an institution, we have more work to do to support our Black and Latinx students who are experiencing disparate outcomes related to retention and graduation. You can view all that data on our website. So the question is, how might we do this? How might we begin to answer the questions that are surfaced by these data? I'm going to pass the mic back to our guest facilitators to provide some guidance for us.
Thank you. So we're encouraged by the work that's already been done and the strong relationships that exist between the campuses. One of the things that we found in our work and the research is that obviously we can't do this alone, and transfer is a responsibility of both institutions, actually, including high school. But with regard to the two institutions, looking at how each of us can benefit from each other's opportunities that are provided. So as we began the work that we did looking at transfer, we looked at how well the university responds to transfer students and how welcoming they are. And as such, over the course of the years, from our first article in 2011 to now, our book that was released last year, creating a transfer receptive culture, looking at what is it exactly that we could be doing differently or enhancing that would allow us to become more welcoming for transfer students. We also realized that this was not an effort that the university could do alone. It was something that they had to do in conjunction, cooperation and collaboration with the community college. Therefore, our 5 elements, which you'll hear in a few minutes, are really focused on things that happen at the community college, things that happen at the 4-year, and then things that happen together. So we're excited to present that, and I'll turn it over to Paulina.
Next slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Transfer-Sending Culture research established, well, the research was created or initiated by Dr. Armida Ornelas and our Dr. Daniel Solorzano at UCLA. They're our friends and our colleagues. And so the research establishes that California has one of the largest concentration of Latinx students. 32 of every 100 public high school Latinx graduates began their pursuit of a higher education at a California community college, and an average of 3 Latinx students out of each 100 actually transferred to a university. And so this we understand as a transfer pipeline which was established. This term was coined through this research. So as a result of all of that collection of data that shows that the rate of transfer for Latinx students was dismal and is and we continue to work on that, obviously. Transfer Center Culture research recommends for us to normalize transfer at California community colleges, standardize the transfer process so all students who aim to transfer at a university can do so in a very efficient and timely manner. It asks or recommends that we streamline the transfer process, and it really calls for the campus as a whole, that includes faculty, staff, administration, and even community partners, to take ownership of the campus transfer mission. the transfer sending culture research is actually foundational to transfer receptive culture.
Thank you, Paulina. We could not have a transfer receptive culture if we do not have a transfer sending culture. These two cultures go hand in hand and are definitely on the same pathway. This is a repeat of the definition that we provided earlier. If you came in a little later, we just wanted to reiterate the definition of a TRC. And I really want to emphasize here that the definition and the elements and the concept of this framework has all come from the work of CCCP, the Center for Community College Partnerships at UCLA. I consider CCCP to be the pioneer and the founder of this work. So TRC, once again, is a commitment by the university. It has to be university initiated to support community college students of color. And Sarah just shared all the racial inequities that we see within transfer from a particular community college or set of community colleges to a university. So it's the university's commitment to help students navigate the community college, to figure out the appropriate coursework for their major selection, the application process, which includes personal statements and workshops. And then once they arrive at the campus, to understand that the work then begins in retention and graduation to help them earn a baccalaureate degree or beyond, as Alfred mentioned earlier, into graduate school, professional school to complete that preschool to PhD pipeline. TRC is something that we have theorized in its inception, in particular in the work of CRT. And it is something that is, I think, really different in the early waves of community college research that we explicitly wanted to foreground and center issues related to race and racism. We were challenged on earlier publications to drop CRT and that it may not be an appropriate framework for transfer. But we saw that that was the only way that we could really begin to give credit to those who have laid the foundation for transfer and those who have challenged the system by transferring between certain institutions. Just for a brief synopsis here, CRT is a theoretical framework. This is something that has caught national attention as of late, formally being banned by the previous administration in federal diversity trainings and now being rescinded by the current administration. If you haven't heard anything about this theory, it's definitely a hot topic and it's absolutely relevant to the work that we do. CRT first and foremost asserts the role of white supremacy in shaping American institutions. We understand that white supremacy is a force that pervades most systems within the United States, and that includes education. CRT has branched off to multiple fields, and there is a field within educational, within K-12 practice and higher ed practice. And there, CRT helps us challenge dominant discourse as it relates to theory, policy, and practice in terms of how K-12 and higher ed is delivered. So if you hear things like white privilege or intersectionality or unconscious bias or diversity and equity and inclusion, those all have CRT roots, and those all have branches into the work that we do within transfer receptive work and transfer sending work. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Dimpal, for providing that framework. And I think in the moment that we're living, I think it's so important to really understand those frameworks as we have learned from the pandemic. Those disparities have become so evident to all of us. Well, to some of us, we already knew them, but it has become really evident to a lot of folks how the disparities impact different people. And with the BL movement and the protests throughout the summer, and then the most recent insurrection in the Capitol, I think it's become really evident that all of these concepts do play an important role in our society, and therefore play an important role in the educational system. So I'm talking about the 5 elements. So I'm gonna be just briefly mention each of them so that we can have an understanding about how they operate and how we are using them in the work that we do. And we're going to start with the high institutional priority, right? Which is something that we feel is important both pre-transfer and post-transfer. The way that we view it from the university perspective is, of course, that the transfer function is not something that is an afterthought, but that is done in conjunction with when you're thinking about how we create policies and practices that impact not only our incoming freshman students, but also our transfer students. And as such, we need to ensure that those issues are at the forefront. And so we'll start first with the way that is done at the community college. So I'm invite Paulina to share a little bit of some of that information.
Yes, absolutely. So East LA College has done extensive work in prioritizing transfer and creating and establishing the transfer sending culture. A few years back, our president created a transfer task force. It was composed of 48 students, faculty, staff, administrators, and university partners. We spent an entire summer, multiple times a week, looking at our campus as a whole. We were evaluating what we had in place for students as it relates to transfer. We utilized the completion by design student journey framework. If you're familiar with the framework, it looks at the life cycle of a student at connection, entry, progress, and completion. And we were looking for transfer in every step of the student journey. We looked at our organizational culture. We reviewed transfer data. We went over our campus ecosystem, recognizing what we were doing intentionally or perhaps even unintentionally to hinder the transfer access for our students. And we started reshaping and reforming what we were doing through the entire student cycle at our campus to support successful transfer access. We developed programs and services to address the gaps in the students' transfer journey. And one of the stellar partnerships that we created was, and we continue to have, with the UCLA CCCP partnership program and services. At an institutional level, I would say that one great outcome from this task force was the development of a transfer committee on our campus that is within the shared governance organization on our campus. It's a committee that is an offshoot of the Academic Senate. And so this committee meets monthly, takes minutes, we do the whole process and actually make recommendations and keep transfer and the transfer pulse alive at the institutional level. Some of the outcomes that we continue to have as a result of all of this work, out of 115 community colleges in California, ELAC is presently number 3 to the CSU system and number 20 to the UC system as of the years 1920. That's the most recent data. Although we're not absolutely at the top, we have had we have made great strides because of our collective institutional efforts and our commitment from the top and at every aspect on our campus. If you are not familiar, our state chancellor, Chancellor Oakley, has established the Vision for Success. And our goal as a state in California is that over 5 years, we should be increasing transfer by 35%, specifically to CSU and UC campuses. These are just a few examples of some of the work that we've done, but highlighting how important it is to make transfer a priority at your community college.
And to follow up with that, I think the other part, an aspect that I want to talk about and that we definitely explore in the book is, one of the questions that we ask is, who gets to create that high institutional priority, right? Oftentimes, it is always seen as a top-down type of process. But what we argue is that it's not necessarily the only way to create that priority. That priority is created in many different ways by the different stakeholders in the institution. So for example, the best example I can give you is Alfred Herrera. He created the institutional priority not only in our campus, throughout the UC campuses and nationally. So someone who everyone knew the moment that he stepped into the room that transfer was going to be talked about. There was no question about it. And the moment he was in the room, transfer was going to be a priority. So I think that's a very clear, of course, very clear way on creating priority as a staff member in our institutions. And our students, of course. Our students, I think, are the ones that are letting us know, and as we center their experiences, they tell us what they need and what's important to them. And I think at this point, we have many examples. In our campus at UCLA, we have created an office within the student government. There's a transfer rep. Oftentimes, because of the way in which student government policies are created, sometimes or transfer students are unable to participate in student government, but UCLA's student government created a specific position for a transfer rep. And most recently also, we have had transfer students in their trustees or student trustees positions. Both of the two, one of them who was one of our scholars, Jamal, was the trustee last year, and the incoming is a Berkeley transfer student, parenting student as well. So again, that high institutional priority can also be created from the bottom up, ensuring that our students' voices are being heard as well. Moving on to the next element, which is the transfer-specific outreach. We also, I'm going to ask also Paulina to talk a little bit about that as well, because I think this is where the combination, really that breaking down those silos is so important.
Thank you, Santi. So in terms of pre-transfer, that means at community college, right? At San Jose City College, at East LA College in my case. And so some of the things that we've done to create that culture is number one, establishing partnerships with the universities, residential summer programs that extend throughout the academic year. The star one, of course, being with CCCP at UCLA, but we have those partnerships with actually UC Santa Barbara, we have UC San Diego, we have Loyola Marymount. We have a number of universities that we work with to have these experiences for students. We have a cycle of peer mentors. UCLA CCCP actually utilizes peer mentors to work with current community college students, and most, if not all, of our peer mentors at ELAC are former ELAC students who are at UCLA. They've transferred on. As you all know, students listen to their peers before they listen to others, instructors or administrators, whatever it might be. They have more influence. So we really utilize and maximize the use of the mentors. Some of the work that we have done has included a visit from our UCLA Chancellor Block and the administrative team to East LA College. And so during that visit that we had a few years back, and maybe it's time for another one, we actually partnered across the areas of service, of academics, of admissions, to work with each other and get to know each other and streamline processes for our students. I always like to say that we were neighbors and now we're family, because we maintain close working relationships and can reach out to each other to, if there are any challenges or barriers, or want to promote and support new opportunities for our students and for our transfer students from East LA College. Some of the other things that we've done is we have student success advocates. They're instructional faculty. This supports the premise that all are engaged, fully engaged with the transfer process. The student success advocates, they meet regularly through our professional development on campus. It is led by counselors in our counseling department, and they share information, best practices. They have dialogues with instructional faculty, and most importantly of all, the instructional faculty give students nudges throughout the year, all related to transfer and the support services, and they help to make those connections with students in their classroom to the actual support services. One of the institutional things that we did to continue this transfer mission and create it was we established an extended orientation. Right when students are brand new and come to ELAC, we actually implement an orientation that every student is required to participate in, but then we added an extended orientation because we like to say that transfer begins on day one. So from day one, we actually start initiating and sharing information and showing where all the transfer hotspots are on campus and where to receive the services and what the pathways are. Many of the peer mentors that we have from the different universities that work on our campus actually participate in those sessions also, in order to establish the relationship, make the connection, and for our students to start seeing and envisioning themselves as being capable and having the potential of moving beyond community college and into a university and beyond. Another program that we've developed is the Latina Completion and Transfer Academy. We found, unfortunately, that many of our students were staying longer than really they should. And so we found about, I don't know, a couple thousand students that had more than 100 units. We disaggregated and found the Latinas. We recognized that they were taking over 10 years to transfer. And when we dug deeper, we realized that they had maximized their university level, transfer level math and English courses. There are attempts for those courses. In community college, you can only take a course 3 times and then you can no longer take it. So we created an academy for them. We embedded supplemental instruction. We embedded leadership, critical race theory, community cultural wealth. And this program has really assisted in getting those rates, transfer rates up for those students, having them complete their journey. So there are many facets of what can be done at any community college based on their student population and needs. And this obviously all happens before they transfer out. But as an institution, we need to make sure and really envision our students as transfer students from the day they come to our doorstep.
Thank you, Paulina. And again, from the university point of view, I just want to mention that, of course, we partner up with our community colleges, and we respond to what the realities are of our transfer students at this point, right? I mean, if we're going to create transfer-specific outreach, it has to be responsive to the actual lives and the actual moments that we're living. So for example, for us this last summer, as we move into this remote environment, we obviously felt that there was going to be something that was not going to be the same in terms of how we used to do our work and create community, because one of the things that we do in the work that we do is to create community at the campus so the students feel like the campus is a place they can go home, right? Not being able to be on campus and not being able to do the same work in the same manner meant that we needed to rethink as an institution, right? On again, not placing the burden on the student, because oftentimes what institutions do is they will, the message that students receive is that in order for you to be successful at this institution, you need to change, you need to adapt as a student. And of course, that needs to happen, but the institution also needs to respond to that as well, right? And the institution needs to be held accountable to respond in the same manner to be able to provide that support and to provide the pathways to success. So for this summer, what we did in the center is to create more tailored programs that specifically address different communities at the community college. So we have programs that focus on the parent and student. We had foster youth, a variety of number of programs that specifically address those communities. And because we were able to do more of those with less resources, we expanded some of those communities. So we were able to address the formerly incarcerated system impacted students, for example. That was the first one that we did this year. We're on the works right now to do another one that's going to focus on the LGBTQ transfer community as well. So in this way, even though of course there are some opportunities lost, there's also some opportunities gained, and we're looking at that as a potential to establish more relationships with the community colleges as well. As we move to the post-transfer, and I think this is a particularly important aspect right now, as we are have a number of students at this point who are basically doing all of this in this remote environment, are applying in a remote environment, are thinking about what school they're going to have to choose in a remote environment. That transition piece is so important at this point, right? So being able to talk to students, well, how do you select a campus that you may or may not necessarily be actually on campus, that you may, that maybe in the fall, we are going to have you come to campus, but what are your fears and concerns if that's what's going to happen, right? So I think that post-transfer begins in that transition process, in that kind of like gray area where, okay, the student's still at the community college, but it's already committing to a university. And there's so many different things that the student needs, and being able to pair up with the community college and the university to address those issues is really important. There's challenges in the sense of like, how do I pay for the certain things if I'm not receiving just financial aid just yet from the institution where I'm going to transfer to, right? So how do we as community college and universities find those resources for the students, find those ways in which they can feel that the university is responding to the specific needs. So academically and financially are important aspects of it. Of course, bridge programs, a lot of our UCs have those bridge programs, and those are really important to be able to introduce students into the culture of the university. And support that is specific to the actual situation the student's in. A student who is a parenting student has definitely different type of financial needs that need to be addressed, right? And being able to say to those students, these are the type of resources that you'll have at the university, can reassure that student in being able to comfortably say, I will be able to transfer to this institution. I will have the type of support that I need as a parenting student, etc. So I think that's very important as well. Community and family, of course, is crucial. It is important to have that aspect covered as well. We do have a lot of our transfer students who have created an environment that is welcoming to them. So for example, as you can see in my background, the Transfer Pride is a week every quarter, the third week of every quarter at UCLA, we celebrate Transfer Pride. But as we tell our students at CCCP, we have Transfer Pride 365 days out of the year. So, but again, important for the campus as a whole to be able to celebrate students, to be able to support students. And because what we know is that transfer success and the success of our transfer students does not begin when they step into our campus. It begins way before that. It begins in that pre-transfer process, being able to share the information on what will make them successful after they transfer. And success, we don't only measure it in the sense, and this goes into the research and assessment piece of it, right? That is not only going to be measured by graduation rates. That gives us one piece of that success. But I think the other, the other aspect that we are pushing and advocating for is that if they are being successful at graduating, are they also having the best experience possible as they do that, right? Because what we don't want is to push this graduation success at the cost of the students' mental or physical well-being, right? And I think we are really trying to advocate that the experience that transfer students receive is not saying that it should be the same as someone who came in from high school, but it should be similar, and the opportunities that are available should be as much as possible close to the same ones that we're offering our incoming freshman students. And what we're is really important also is that whatever we do in the post-transfer helps us in the pre-transfer. So by showing that our students are being successful after they transfer, and that they're having a great experience after they transfer, they go back to the community college and share that information, which makes then the students of the community college say, okay, this is something that's doable, something that I'm capable of doing, something that will give me a good experience, and vice versa. By being by those students going to the community college, once the community college transfer, because they have already heard all of this information about what does it take in order for you to be successful, there's more likelihood that the students will take advantage of all those opportunities after they transfer as well. So again, that's really important. The research and assessment needs to cover all of those different things, not what we wish it was, because oftentimes what we ask in terms of assessing transfer programs is to look at the 2 years at a community college, the 2 years at the university, but that's not what happens, right? We all know that. We all know that sometimes our students take longer than that in order to navigate that whole process. So yeah, that's the element.
Amazing.
So we're running a little bit shorter on time, so we're gonna get right into this. Sarah, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you so much for setting up this framework for transfer receptive culture and the 5 elements of it. At this point, we want to transition into a dialogue and a conversation. We're so grateful to have some outstanding folks who want to engage with us, with our senior campus leadership and also students. So I would love at this time to welcome our dialogue participants, and I invite you, if you haven't already, to turn on your cameras, and please remember to keep your mic on mute unless you're speaking. And so for those of you to know, those who are joining us for our dialogue session are Jasmine Lara, a SJCC student, Sheriel Paz, another SJCC transfer, President Tomanang, VP Student Affairs Montemayor. From UC Santa Cruz, we have Natalie Espinosa, UC transfer student and parent, Zion Tunstall, UC transfer student, Joshua Solis, a UC transfer alumni, Chancellor Larive, our campus provost and executive vice chancellor Kletzer, and our vice chancellor, Division of Student Affairs and Success, Basile. So thank you so much for joining us all today. This dialogue will be grounded in the 5 elements of TRC, of a transfer receptive and transfer sending culture. And we have 2 main goals for the conversation. The first is to establish common ground that transfer is clearly a high institutional priority for our campuses. I absolutely want to recognize the high engagement and level of engagement from our campus's senior leadership. So thank you so much for being here for this today. The second goal of the dialogue is to discuss ideas for improving the transfer student experience in a way that's grounded in transfer students' actual lived experiences and a conversation that really centers the perspective of transfer students of color. In our conversation, we want to envision what it looks like to consider race when designing transfer-specific outreach resources, financial and academic resources, and community and family engagement. So welcome. Thank you for engaging. And our first set of questions are going to be directed towards our students. So our transfer data, as I showed earlier, reveals that inequities exist in students of color transfer rates from community colleges to UCs. We've learned through Cult of Almost Excellencia that disrupting this inequity involves creating intentional spaces and opportunities for prospective transfer students to develop an identity as UC material. And this is a self-concept that you're capable and that you belong at a UC. So to our students, can you tell us how you came to see yourself as transfer material? Were there any specific events, programs, or people who motivated you? And please describe your pre-transfer experience, telling us what inspired you to make university transfer one of your goals. And I think, Jasmine, you wanted to be the first to respond to that.
Hello, so I'm currently attending SJCC, and I was introduced to Cultivamos Excelencia during applying my first semester at SJCC. I did not know community colleges were offering these kind of programs, but my counselor really did encourage me to, be enrolled in this program. But before that, I felt like I was underperforming as a student and I wouldn't be able to. And she did mention the intensity of this program. But definitely, I don't regret joining the program because I gained lots of skills that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. Joshua, I think you wanted to weigh in on this one as well. Oh, but we can't hear you yet.
Sorry. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Just to kind of add to that, I think for me, my experience or kind of feeling like I was UC material started when I was at community college. And really, if I have to narrow it down, it came from a student-led effort at the UC where they were doing outreach. And I remember there was one individual that was coming to a program that I was involved with at the time. And I remember he asked me if I was interested in the UC, and I said no. He asked me again a couple of weeks later. I said no. And the third time I finally told him, I was like, you know what? I don't think that's a right fit for me. I had just gotten out of prison. I was on parole, and I was on the GPS ankle monitor, so many different things. I was like, you know what? I don't think that is for me. And his eyes lit up, and he was like, you know what? I think you're wrong. I think you should come check out this program known as Underground Scholars. And so I went to go check it out. And sure enough, for the first time, I met about 25 other formerly incarcerated students that were involved in PhD programs, master's programs, and undergraduate programs, involved in work all throughout the state, policy work, advocacy work, and all sorts of different things. And I think it was when I left that event, I remember thinking to myself, I'm definitely going to UC. And I did. And I came to UC Santa Cruz, and I was embraced by stars and the transfer staff, and they gave me, I remember just being embraced by everybody and having all the resources and tools that I needed to make that successful transition from community college, and forever grateful for that. And the one thing I would say that was missing for me was, I think there was a question of, why is it that there's so many formerly incarcerated students at community college, but why is there not many at the UC? And so that was something I kind of questioned back going to the outreach efforts and and the commitment of the folks that were doing the outreach. Again, going back to the person that came to talk to me, it took them 3, maybe 4 times to actually get to me where I finally said yes. So seeing that commitment, I think I could draw back. I'm definitely going to go back to that as my experience of how I came to see myself as UC material. I think it was in all of those things that I began thinking to myself, like, what can I do? And so it was in kind of like all those situations that I began advocating for formerly incarcerated to kind of bring visibility to formerly incarcerated students. And with, you know, long days and long nights and so much support from the institution and everybody at STARS and just throughout campus, we were able to do exactly that. The one takeaway for me, or kind of like the downside of that, was that the amount of work and the amount of energy and the amount of time that I was putting into this advocacy work really took away from the experience of other things that I wanted to pursue, other opportunities that Santa Cruz had to offer. But I was just being pulled in so many different directions in this advocacy that I wasn't able to take advantage of. So for example, I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to go to study at UCDC and internships and research opportunities and things like this. But I couldn't. And so now, if you ask me if I would do it again, I think I would definitely make that sacrifice. I feel like we now have a foundation and we've brought visibility to formerly incarcerated students. And so I would definitely do it again. Yeah, again, I think that's just for me, it's about building the foundation, kind of like leaving the legacy for folks to kind of like build on. Now, and real quick, I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to say that I've been here for almost 3 years now. And, you know, when it comes to change and it's kind of, when it comes to institutional change, the one thing that I've noticed is that when institutional leaders come together and they kind of share this vision of wanting to create that change of kind of like this more diverse and equitable institution, I feel like I've watched it be done like over these past few years. And so when it comes to this question of like motivation or what motivates you or what motivates me, I would say that it's this work. It's the work that I've done. It's the work that you're doing. It's the work that I'm seeing done right now. It's these conversations that we're having. And it's definitely something that I hope to build on in the future. You know, and I guess the last thing I would say is that, yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward to the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. And thank you, Jasmine, for sharing what inspired you, what helped you see yourself as you see material. Our next question, one more for the students, and then we'll be kind of opening it up for a larger conversation. What challenges have you experienced throughout your transfer journey, and specifically with transfer to a UC? How have you navigated the challenges? What resources do you feel like you need to meet your personal, academic, and career goals? And Cherry, I think you wanted to respond to this one.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. So for me, I think that one of my main challenges was the financial part, because I got a lot of like help and resources for like my academics. So, I was great there. Like I knew who to reach out to, but when it came to like the financial part, I was kind of stuck because I just didn't know like who I could talk to about certain things, or if I was even going to like receive like money to like transfer or any of these things. So I think for me, that's like one of my main concerns, like when it comes to transferring, because it has to do with like where I want to go and where I'm going to get that help from. So I think one of the main resources that like I'm looking for as a transfer student is definitely know who I can reach out to and see if there's any help there for me, and like, just be reassured that it's going to be like, there's gonna always be someone helping me in that part. That's not just like for my academics, that's like just to be able to pay for my school, because I think that's it's one of the biggest things there, because without like the money, it's like not possible. So
thanks, Sherry. And Natalie, I think you wanted to weigh in on this one too. Oh, but Natalie looks a little bit frozen. We'll give you a second though. Oh, maybe she's leaving and re-entering. 2 seconds. Okay, well, we will definitely come back to Natalie. I know she definitely wants to share about her experience as a student parent. And I think she'll have a lot to add. Are you there now? Oh,
I have no idea what just happened. I didn't even touch anything and it's kicking me out, I guess. I don't know what happened, guys. So sorry about that. But yeah, I'm assuming you had mentioned I would love to answer this question. Well, hi, my name is Natalie Espinoza. I'm a senior. And basically for me, the challenges that I've experienced my transfer journey in a lot of ways had to do with financial and planning. Children I think in school, having the case, I'm the only person the kids are, you know, doing what they need to do as well. So for me, it was really difficult to
bummer. Okay, Natalie lives in family student housing and they have some known internet challenges down there. So I think we're seeing that pan out right now. We will hear from Natalie, I promise. But let's move on to our next question and we'll bring Natalie into this last conversation because I think she'll definitely be able to add to it as well. And so the question is really, what ideas do you have to improve the transfer experience? And Zion, you're going to kick us off with some really great ideas that you have. And then we really would love for this to be a generative conversation amongst everybody and hearing all your ideas as well. So passing it off to you, Zion.
Hi, thank you so much. I think all the ideas I have fall under 2 categories, and that is to listen and to act. And so with listening, it's listening actively and listening enthusiastically, right? Which is part of what we're doing here right now. So thank you for being here. It's hard for students, especially students of color, to speak up and speak out about what they need. And it's made it even harder when we feel like we feel like we're a burden or no one's listening or people are just listening because, you know, to save face or something. So really listening actively and enthusiastically of like, yes, we want to know what you have to say, please tell us, is important. And then acting in tangible ways, right? So things like equity and inclusion training for staff and faculty quarterly. And I don't like to say diversity training because diversity is really just about who's at the table. It's not about if the people at the table are valued, if the people at the table are being heard. It's just a numbers game. So you're not, as a older than traditional student, I understand the social conditioning that happens in our society, and we don't undo that social conditioning in a weekend. We won't undo it in one online training. It needs to be ongoing, and students talk. When racist things or xenophobic things or et cetera happen on campus or in classrooms, UC Riverside students hear about it. My friends who are still at community college hear about it when they're looking at what colleges they want to transfer to. Social media exists. And so it's really like we need training, and staff and faculty need training so that they can create an environment students of color want to come to and feel safe coming to and will recommend to people that they know. And part of wanting to come to a college is being able to see yourself in the faculty and leadership positions at that college. So actively hiring the Black and the Brown and the Indigenous and the Asian and the POC talent. Maybe there aren't a lot of people of color in that field, but finding them, sending recruiters to graduate programs the same way we send them to community colleges, actively reaching out to the POC that are in that field and saying, hey, we want to make our school a more equitable, more diverse place. We want students of color to feel like they can go into marine biology. come teach at our school, and here's why. And here's how we'll support you in that. Here's why you should want to come to UCSC. Sending, and then, you know, making sure when we're hiring those faculty and those staff members that they have either a background in critical race theory or they're actively engaging in critical race theory and intersectionality. It's not enough to just be able to rattle off something that sounds good. They need to actively be engaged in and understanding how this affects their students' lives so that they can base their teaching pedagogy around it, and asking that in the interview. How does this affect your teaching pedagogy? Give us an example of how you implement this into your teaching pedagogy and how you interact with students based on their backgrounds and how you even discovered your students' backgrounds. These things are important. Reaching out to POC communities, especially lower income POC communities, especially indigenous communities. It's not enough for us to have a land acknowledgement. It's going to those communities, talking to the teachers in their schools, the principals and the students, and saying, hey, what do you need for your students? What do you think your students need for them to be able to get here? And asking the students, what do you need? Make it real for them. Because it's nice to click on a website and see people that look like you, but when someone shows up to your class and is like, you can definitely do this thing, come to our school, we'll show you, here's how we're making that happen. And then finally, approaching this as a human situation. How would you, background, how would you approach this if it were cherished members of your community or of your family instead of a problem to be solved? When we approach racial issues as problems to be solved, we take the humanity out of them. We look at them as statistics, as numbers. And so, for example, when George Floyd was murdered last year and there were protests and riots and things were literally on fire, Black students rallied at UCSC and pushed so that finals would be made optional because we're not okay right now. And UCSC listened to us and made finals that put that within the professor's purview, whether they wanted to make finals optional. But that's how we solve problems, right? But when we look at it from a human standpoint, Black students wouldn't have had to rally around that, because from a human standpoint, you look at it and say, oh my gosh, you guys must be really going through it right now. What do you need? How can we help you? Oh no, like the world has changed drastically. There's a global pandemic, etc. And so we remove that need for students of color, low-income students, queer students, etc., to have to then put in that emotional labor on top of just trying to exist in a world that doesn't want them and exist in an institution where they might not feel like they're wanted. So that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Zion, for kicking us off on some outstanding recommendations for what we can do on our campuses to support transfer students of color. Natalie might be back in here, but I do want to invite, just what ideas does this group have that you want to share, whether it's coming from our students or leadership?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Rowena Tomaning, president of San Jose City College. And I just want to say that I could actually just listen to our students and their recommendations for us for the rest of the afternoon. I always learn, and I learn from students all the time in terms of the experiences that they share with myself and my team. And this idea of listening enthusiastically and actively, and then also taking action and making adjustments concretely to serve our students better, just really resonates for me, and it resonates for my colleagues who are here, with their videos on, but also listening to the webinars. So if we can do that more as everyone in the institution, not just the leaders, I think that we will get closer to really becoming student-ready colleges and valuing that humanizing education piece, that is missing, right? And that is what CRT critiques, that the majority of our institutions are white-centric. And if we're going to dismantle whiteness, we really need to decolonize and be active in promoting a humanizing education and services. So I'll just stop there. Thank you, Zion.
So maybe I can follow President Tomeneg. Thank you for your comments. Always inspiring, Rowena. And I just would start by thanking the students from the bottom of my heart. I do always enjoy listening to students, and I appreciate very much that you will share both your stories, your challenges, and places where we can be better. I think that we recognize as a university that we put barriers in the way of many of our students, not in an intentional way, but barriers nonetheless. And to remove those barriers and to serve our students, it's really helpful to have the personal experiences of individual students. So, you know, the transfer experience that we've been talking about today is one that's really important for our universities, for San Jose City College, for UC Santa Cruz, but for universities across our state. And that having said that, I think we've seen good examples today among the challenges that our students face, and that it's each student is a human being, and each student has unique challenges. So while we can do things as a universities, both as a sending and a receiving university, to try and help smooth those pathways, that recognition of the challenges that a student who is formerly incarcerated, who is one of our Renaissance scholars, students who might be living in family student housing, like we heard about today, and have spotty internet. We are working to fix that problem, and I hope it will be fixed soon, Natalie. But also students who are trying to be students and parents, and in Santa Cruz and in San Jose too, manage the high cost of living. So there are many challenges and many ways in which we can help students. And the important thing for that, I think, is really partly tied up in this active and interested listening that you talked about, Zion, in barrier reduction, but also in having pathways that are easy for students to see, representation through faculty, staff, and peer mentors who can help students both know that they can be successful as a transfer student, but also a part of a community. And importantly, I think having a focus on each student and solving their particular needs, that becomes a challenge when you're a university of 19,000 people. But we know that that we have so many folks who are just dedicated to helping our students succeed that we can do even better when it comes to working through those problems. I just would like to add that you know, this conversation today is really an outcome of the grant, the Cultivamos Excelencia. And Sarah, appreciate your leadership and all of the work by folks at UC Santa Cruz and in our partner institution in San Jose for this. I could go on and on, but I want to leave some time and space for others. So I'm just going to say thank you and then mute myself.
Thank you, Cindy. I know Lori has to leave promptly at 3, so I did want to give you a chance to weigh in before you had to go.
Sarah, thank you for that. And I want to borrow a sentence from President Tomeneg and just say how much I learn from listening. And it's not passive listening, Zion, right? But this opportunity to actively listen, and big smile, right? So enthusiastically, right, through, you know, as much as we can share our enthusiasm by Zoom, right? And I know that as EVC, right, one of the easy, yet it may not strike everyone as easy, one of the easy ways to talk about commitment is to point out resources and programs. And I also, though, Joshua, want to say that commitment also has to be persistence, right? That I'm hearing from you, right? And so this is a moment where I want to be able to affirm that commitment that I share with the chancellor about research and my other colleagues about resources and programs and persistence. And the particular piece that I just want to share my own personal commitment to, it's not that I'm not personally committed to resources and programs and persistence, but the piece that forces us always, that challenges us always, yes, to think about our students always as human beings, and that this is not, sometimes we do indeed have to problem solve, right? And problem solving can be a big part of my job on some days, but the real change comes from institutional challenge and institutional change, and that's far bigger than problem solving. That we have to acknowledge every day that many of the barriers that are there and the unintentional barriers are there because of the way we were constructed, right? That this was a campus and a system constructed on what at the time were traditional and exclusionary visions, right, of who was a student. And that's from critical race theory, that's what I think about a lot of the time is how do we step up always to that challenge? And the real piece of that challenge that I could use help with on a continuing basis is how can we as an institution better support and share in that burden that can be advocacy and emotional labor, right? I mean, I hear that a lot, and there are many places in which I think I want to be really pushed hard by all of you to help me understand how the institution can play a bigger role in the advocacy, and that it's not invisible labor, right? It's labor some people may choose not to look at, right? But it's surely not invisible. That there are so many pieces to pay attention to, but it's my personal commitment to pay attention to that element. So I am so happy to be here, and I may be able to squeeze a few extra minutes out, but thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I think Natalie's here on phone if we want to hear from Natalie now. Are you there, Natalie?
I am, but I might have to just keep my camera off because I think the video is what's causing the connection to cut off for me. But I guess I don't even know what I didn't say much, so I guess I'll just kind of start from the beginning. But when I transferred here as a single parent. I have 2 children. I have a 5-year-old and 4-year-old. I've been in school since my children were born, basically. So a big issue, and I guess a big challenge for me that I've had to deal with, I decided to go to school as a single parent, was figuring out how to balance the reality of having to put all of my attention and effort and energy and all of that into something that was going to require just as much effort from me as being a parent. And being a parent, in my opinion, is a lot harder in many ways. But when you go to school, you dedicate yourself to the idea that you're going to do the best that you can. And that's coming.
Darn. Hopefully she'll be able to patch back in or try her phone next time. Anything come up for you all? How can we improve the transfer experience for students of color? Other ideas that were inspired or that anyone else wants to share from our student participants or leadership?
So I had something that I wanted to add. This is Roland from San Jose City. So as I was listening to the students, which I like, as many people said, was the best part of this. The call to action is really ours. And so if we look at becoming a student-ready college, and then also a transfer-ready from the very beginning, from what the time that we talk to students at the high school to the time they come to us, but really designing them. And so I'm taking notes, and the one note that I want to share is the piece about financial aid. So I think we can do a better job at working collaboratively and taking action so that students and parents have a seamless information transition from high school to community college to then the university.
I also wanted to share that I'm glad that VP Montemayor talked about that information, because, you know, we are starting to really look at ourselves at City as also, you know, how do we keep improving as a transfer receptive institution with our 6 unified school district partners? You know, how can we enhance and do more of the parent engagement, you know, across the diversity of our student populations early on? I mean, we already have some opportunities for early college credit and dual enrollment. We've been working pretty hard, I think, on the affordability and basic needs issues, and our campus life director, with guidance from Roland, has developed sort of an anti-poverty plan. And we're part of a statewide consortium around affordability and basic needs. So I think as long as from institutional perspective, it's that idea that has already been shared by many of our speakers around intentionality and really doing that integration and not working in silos. And I think that the more that we do that at City College, and then also making sure that students are at the center, that our equity outcomes are at the center, you know, I think the more impact we can make with not only transfer, you know, but many of our students also want to get into their careers right away, and they choose our career education pathways. But even while our students are choosing a career education pathway, you know, it's up to us. We have the responsibility to make sure that their certificate, you know, what they're taking is applicable when they want to return, you know, to complete the bachelor's degree and move on to UCSC, you know, and other institutions. So I just wanted to add that around the responsibility that we have, you know, as an institution, to plan better, allocate resources, you know, be more intentional in our planning and not operate in silos. You know, some of our institutions, even while we have, for example, culturally responsive curriculum, you know, and we have ethnic studies departments, they've been siloed off and marginalized, you know, historically. And it's also time to bring them to the center, you know, because we know that culturally responsive curriculum adds to, you know, increasing an inclusive campus culture, which then can lead to a positive climate.
Please, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I think one of the questions that I have, because I often think my way to solutions by thinking in terms of questions. And the question that I'm asking myself right now, based on the insights from the students, is the following one. If we took the life cycle of a transfer student at UC Santa Cruz, how would we be able to really imagine the open doors and success pathways that actually reflect a transfer receptive culture? Like, what does that actually look like? And that's not a hypothetical question. I think that that's actually a very tangible question that we should work to answer because of, in part, what we talked about earlier with regard to, it's not just outcomes data that tells us about the effectiveness of what we're doing in the lived experience of students. So I just want to appreciate not just the listening that we could do, but to the action that we can take in follow up to this. So thank you very much for the space that's been created today.
Did you want to weigh in on that question, Alfred? I saw your video pop up, but we can't hear you yet.
I've been wanting to weigh in a lot of them, but they're great. Thank you, first of all, to President Tamanang and Chancellor and the EVC and VPs. It's great to have you here. And your presence here alone today is an indication that you are interested in this, because you have lots to do, and to be able to spend it here listening to the stories of students and the realities that they face are a commitment in itself. So we appreciate that. In regards to moving into action, that's one of the things we're going to do a little bit later, is looking at how do we really take this now, this theory, and put it into practice, and how are we doing that? And some of the examples that have been shared, STARS is a perfect place. But how many STARS are there on the campus where students feel comfortable? And we'll talk about mapping and those kinds of spaces in a few minutes as well. Thank you for that.
Do any of our students have any last comments or suggestions that you wanted to share?
I would say for me, one of the things that was crucial for me being able to navigate my way through UCSC was the help of Dr. Aaron Jones and Dr. Shantae Thompson, and they were both at the African American Resource Center. I came to them, I was in their office many times, many days, for many hours. They got to know me really well because we make it difficult to navigate this campus coming in. Freshman students have 4 years to figure it out, 4 or more years to kind of figure it out. And then the last 2 years to really implement things in place. And it's sped up for transfer students, but 2 people or just the ethnic resource centers and STARS, that's not enough. I appreciate the comment that there should be more of these places on campus. And we really need to implement that, whether that's hiring more staff, or that would be, an institutional thing to talk about, but there needs to be more. It shouldn't have fallen on 2 people to take care of 700 plus Black students. And they did a phenomenal job at doing that, but the weight shouldn't have just been on them. It shouldn't fall on just STARS to take care of every transfer and reentry student on this campus. It's too much to ask of resources that we don't give enough money to do that work. We're not budgeting our funds to these places well. They need more resources so that they can hire more people, so that they can do this work. And so making things more accessible, making even small things like making the website easier to navigate. I've talked to so many students and all of us had the same experience with the website, and it was like, why isn't this just a click away? Why do I feel like I'm navigating through Narnia to get to try and find these resources? Which leads us back to asking the same 2 or 3 people that we know on campus, do you know how to get to so-and-so? And so like their time that could be spent doing other things to help us is now spent on navigating tiny things that we should be able to do ourselves if it was made more accessible to us. If we made the website more accessible, if we gave these resource centers more funding, if we gave the DRC more funding, if we went in assuming people don't know how to do these things, because currently the UC system is built for the people that it was built for. And that's middle to upper class cishet white men. We'll just say it. And so for those of us who didn't grow up, if you're a first generation, maybe, for those of us who didn't grow up with family members who can help us navigate these systems, or in communities who can help us navigate these systems, the tiny things that everyone else takes for granted, you being able to do, oh yeah, just go in the financial aid and da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not an intuitive, someone just said in the chat, it's not an intuitive process for us. And so really sitting down with people and being like, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they all went to college. This is really intuitive for me. How is that for you as a first generation just coming in? How can we make this easier to navigate? And I think those are really the conversations that are important. Funding for the places that are helping us and making it accessible for us to navigate the things that are maybe intuitive, maybe other people find intuitive because they've had experience with it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that insight, Zion. I think Natalie's on the phone. Are you there, Natalie? If you are, we would like to hear what suggestions you have to improve the transfer student experience. Please.
Okay, guys, I'm so sorry for, attempting this so many times, but I have no clue what to do to fix the internet right now. So bear with me. Thank you so much, guys, for the patience with me. But what do I think? I actually think that for me, one thing that the school should definitely focus on with transfer students, especially single parents or just student parents in general, is giving us a proper orientation to the school and what the resources and the support system does look like at the UC for student parent students. The reason I say this is because when I originally decided to transfer to a UC, I knew that doing this, I was going to have to, in a sense, do this alone. I wasn't going to have a lot of people who, one, probably knew what my situation was because I'm not from this area. And two, no one in my family's ever been to a UC. I don't know people who've gone to a UC other than maybe one distant family member. And none of them were parents when they went to school. So I really was alone when it came to figuring out if I decided to go to the UC, how was I going to maneuver myself and my two children with me so that they don't experience any sort of like lack of life, lifestyle. I'm not saying that we live this extravagant life whatsoever, but I think that since we already don't have a lot of means to work with, it would have been really unfair for me to put my kids in a situation where they would have had less just so that I could, for the time being, work for us to eventually have more. And so that being the case, it took me a good year to plan out my actual transition from the UC, from the community college to the UC. I had to plan childcare. I had to plan a job. I had to figure out where we were going to live. I had to figure out, how was I going to find childcare? How was I going to go to school? How was I going to be able to do basic things? The grocery store, like how close is the nearest hospital, because I am by myself. So all of the things that I would have thought, because mostly people come to the UC, regular students have some sort of support system or they're alone, and so they don't have to worry about anyone but themselves. I had to deal with my school having the resources that I needed so that I could succeed as a student parent. And that being the case, I planned myself to get here, took a year, made it. I did everything that I had planned, on my list to check off, which is great. But once I got here, I was back to square zero because when you're here, there's no orientation to a student parent. It's just whatever the students, can access, but it's not always accessible for us who are student parents to go to some of these study hours or these tutoring hours, or some of the resources that they have are just not catered to what a student parent needs specifically. I mean, even financially, we do get some support through financial aid, of course, that helps with tuition and room and board to some extent, but there's nothing additional when they take into consideration that I have two children, and they're going to have needs, they're going to have things that I have to provide for them as well. And being a full-time student, I have to balance school, I have to balance a job, I have to balance being a parent and learning how to do that as well. So the transition in was a little lofty. Luckily, I was able to run into Stars and Janet because they really kept me grounded, and they really helped me realize that, you know, what I wanted to do here is not too far out of my reach, even though I am balancing so many different things. They really helped me realize that it might be a challenge, but I can definitely do it. And they pointed me in the right direction. They've supported me through opportunities that they've offered me and stuff like that. And I've taken advantage of all of them because I need all those opportunities in order to survive, you know, the system itself. It wasn't created, like Lori mentioned earlier, the system was created on original traditional values. I highly doubt they were taking into consideration that a single mom at 31 years old was going to be getting her undergraduate degree with a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old and somehow do it all by herself, because I have no family here and I literally have to figure this out by myself every single day. When we were evacuated from the fires, when we had no power, when we have COVID scares because we've been exposed for different, you know, through different things, it has put me in so many different levels of anxiety and, you know, fear, that my only fear now is my transition out, because now that I've established some sort of normalcy, rather, you know, the normalness we can get in this last year is a little hard to, you know, describe, but the normalcy that I've created in the world I've, you know, made support me, you know, through this, you know, journey of getting through the UC, I'm afraid of losing even just a little bit of what support I have, because once I'm graduated, there's no proper transition out of this system as well. So I have to figure out, because I'm not from here, how am I going to leave with my kids? I have nowhere to go. I don't have a job. I just graduated. You know, I have to provide so many things for my children that I don't know how this experience entirely affects them. I don't know if they see this as a good experience. I don't know if they see this as a bad experience, but my goal is to give my kids the idea that the UC experience is a positive thing and it's something that they should want to have themselves. I think it's rather unique that they can come back to this campus and go, wow, I remember playing there when I was a little kid. I feel like I'm at home because this is where my mom used to take walks with me, you know, to, you know, just get the, you know, wiggles out of their system or whatever. And the problem is I can't really feel that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, is this the best thing for them to see me go through? Because I don't actually have all the support I need. And it has been very difficult. And one way or the other, COVID has made it even more so like overwhelming for single student parents in general to be on campus. I've been on campus the entire time over this past year. And I guess my whole comment would be that I feel that the UC should not turn a blind eye to student parents, because we provide the opportunity to give generational exposure to the positive influence that college could be for children. And I think that if we make the experience for student parents difficult, it may be difficult for kids in the future who go through this experience with their parents to have faith in the UC system or this college system in general. I don't know if kids in the future will care about money the way we care about it now. They probably will, they probably won't, I don't know. But I know that what I want them to care about is education and knowledge. And if they see that it's a struggle, they may not be as open to it when they're older. So long story short, I think we need a better support system for transfer and student parents coming in and going out. And that's basically it, you guys. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm so glad you were able to join us over the phone. And thank you everyone who has shared so many insightful comments with us about how we can improve the transfer experience while centering our transfer students of color. Did anybody want to make any last comments before we transition out?
I had a question asked of me. that somebody wanted me to answer. And it was, how is the support or lack thereof from the other offices I interacted with, especially my major advising? I've already spoken on the African American Resource Center, and they were excellent. And then I found STARS, also excellent. And as far as everything else, it was a little challenging. Financial aid was a train wreck. And DRC was a little bit of a train wreck. And as far as major advising goes, I found it helpful in the sense of, here's what classes you need for your major. Good luck. But the rest of it, being an older student, I have different things to consider than younger students who are 19, 20, et cetera, coming in have to consider. I'm 30 this year. So when I graduate from here, I can't just hop into a graduate program. I need to see whether that fits into my life in my 30s. Do I plan to get married? Do I plan to have kids? Am I buying a house? What am I doing next? Can I settle in this? If it's a PhD program, can I settle in this area for the next 4 to 7 years? And all of that kind of gets overlooked with advising. It's really about, here's a research thing you could do and you could apply over here. But I felt like it was lackluster when it came to, I'm this age, I'm a non-traditional student. Like Natalie spoke to, I have other things going on in my life than just college that I need to figure out how to mesh together. And with financial aid coming in as a lower income student, there are times when I think it's really important that UC Santa Cruz recognizes, and all the UCs recognize, that students are not living the way students used to live. We're not out here just getting apartments off campus with a traditional lease and all this other stuff. For a long time, I lived in a hippie house with no lease, with probably more people than were allowed to live there. And the landlords in Santa Cruz kind of just turn an eye and pretend they don't see it, but they know what's happening. And so when your rent goes up and you need to adjust for that in financial aid, and they ask you, hey, prove to us that your rent went up, your landlords need to sign this. It's like, well, you're asking me to then put my housing on the line, because actually the agreement is that our landlord pretends they don't know and we get to keep living here. And that's the situation for so many students in Santa Cruz. And so having, which is again where, the humanity rather than the problem to be solved comes in, recognizing that this is how students are living, especially in places that are really expensive like Santa Cruz and San Jose and the Bay in general. We're sharing bedrooms and we're paying $800 a month to do it. And there's no lease that says you get half a bedroom, it's $800, and now your rent is gonna go up this much, because no landlord is renting out half a bedroom. So navigating other departments, it fell on, shout out to them again, it fell on Dr. Jones and Dr. Thompson a lot to help me navigate those resources, because I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know who to not upset. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I need help. Can you help me? Maybe if you ask, they'll listen. Maybe if you reach out to them, they'll respond to my email. And so I think that was a thing that occurred a lot, me having to go through someone else that had more authority on campus to get questions answered that I should have just been able to ask, or to get something done that wasn't actually that big of a deal, but should have they needed to hear from someone with a little more authority to take the time out to figure out what was going on. I will say slug support, also magnificent, but also underfunded in the things that they can help us with and the things that we need. I evacuated from 2 separate fires. I had to stay on campus for about a month because I evacuated from the Creek fire. That messed up my financial aid. That should have never happened. And they're like, well, you can't, since you're on campus, it's gonna mess up your financial aid because they're gonna count for you living on campus. It was a whole thing. And it's like, I depend on financial aid to pay my bills, to live with, not just, and so you taking my money because I'm evacuated here until I can go, this is the problem. So I think there are a lot of, as far as other departments goes, there's probably a lot of red tape that I'm unaware of happening here, a lot of bureaucracy possibly happening here. But also a lack of acknowledgement that the students that are here, whether we're on financial aid or not, have paid for a service that we're not getting oftentimes. And it's not just for our education, it's for all the other fees and things that go into campus life and all these other things that we deserve to have help with, especially at UCs who are more expensive than CSUs. We paid extra money, we're taking out student loans, we're in debt so that we can have this better education and have somebody help us with these things. And I think we're already struggling in a pandemic, we're already struggling with racism. That's insidious and everywhere, and we shouldn't have to jump through hoops for financial aid. We shouldn't have to jump through hoops for how do I change my name as a trans student on my student ID? They're saying that I can't do it. Why do I have to talk to 5 different people to do this? Life is already hard for us, even if we were just regular students. And now as students of color, queer students, trans students, disabled students, we've tacked on other intersections. So all of this to say, it was a little rough. And I think while we're discussing all of this, part of it should be, how do we make this easier? Not just how do we make it so that you want to come, but how do we make it easier once you get here so that you want to stay? Because the amount of people I know that came here for a quarter and was like, you know what? It's been really real, but actually I'm gonna leave. I'm going to a CSU or I'm going to a different UC, I can't do this. It's too high, especially among Black students. And when I came here, we weren't even 4% of the student population at UCSC. So thank you for your question. I hope I answered it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our dialogue participants for engaging in this really, really important conversation. And this isn't just a conversation, it's a platform for us to listen and take action. And so I very much appreciate our students speaking, sharing experiences, perspectives, our senior leadership from both of our campuses, partnering with us and with our students to do just that. I think to make it easier to improve the climate on our campuses and to truly welcome and create a transfer sending and a transfer receptive culture on our campuses. On that note, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So it's time to fill up your water bottle, go to the bathroom if you need to. It is 3:27 right now. So we will get going again at 3:32. See y'all in a few.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I know I needed that break. Thank you for extending it just by a couple minutes more. I first wanted to thank our panel. I'm not sure if they're still available to us, but I know that their words definitely left a big impression, both to the leadership and to the students. So at this point, what we wanted to do was kind of build on the momentum of the panel and just ask either if to put it in the chat if possible, if you have any immediate questions regarding transfer receptive culture, regarding the 5 elements, and if not, then we'll go into like an action-oriented piece, again, that I think extends the panel in terms of like declarations or self-proclamations, both for students and staff. I did see that there was one question in the Q&A, but I also just wanted to open it up here. Is there any other questions that you would want to be answered before we move forward? This is like me teaching on a Friday evening, huh? This is what it's like. All good. Let's go straight to this one question in the Q&A, and then we'll transfer to the declarations. So Pascal, I'm not sure if you're still on, but thank you for this question. The question related to the cost in terms of the difference between a UC and a CSU, and perhaps Latinx students are choosing CSUs because of income or because of the price of tuition. I would say that could be one factor, right? It could be the cost of tuition. But I think similar to what one of the panelists shared earlier, in terms of, being presented with the UC option and then not thinking it was for them. I believe that was Joshua or Josh. What I've always tried to do in terms of my own advising and my own practice is to see if we're giving students adequate choice, right? Are students being presented with the choice of a UC and the choice of a Cal State? I went to a UC for grad. I'm now teaching at a Cal State. I see the strengths and areas to develop for both institutions. I don't think one is better than the other. I think it really depends on your trajectory and what you would want to do as a student in terms of your major selection and the support and the geography that you're seeking. So even though the UC may have a higher tuition price tag, it could offer higher support, right? It could be related to a more robust financial aid package than you may get at a Cal State. So the costs could even out depending on your financial aid eligibility. But as Zion was sharing and other students were sharing earlier, that is incumbent on the receiving institution to be really transparent and really clear about their financial aid packages and about what their ability is in terms of offering. So cost is a factor, but I would say choice and presentation of choice is a bigger factor in that discussion. Paulina or Santi or Alfred, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think I'd rather just go into the declarations.
Okay, awesome. Great. And then we'll save future questions towards the end. All right, Santi, if you're ready to go, I think we're ready to go.
I hope so. It looks like my Wi-Fi now is starting to act up. It's around the time that it starts to give up. It says, just it's supposed to be happy hour, and what are you doing here? So I'm hoping that it's going to be stable enough to do this. Okay. All right. So I think I want to say thank you to Zion for that that part of listening. I think that's such an important part of it, and part of what we're going to do right now is it is going to be a little bit of that listening part of it, and I think even speaking about myself, I think sometimes it's when we hear what students need. And of course, sometimes we feel that that's a criticism of our shortcomings as administrators, as institutions, as educators. It sometimes feels that way, even though it may not be meant that way. I think for a lot of us, just because we care so much, right? And instead of listening to what the student may be saying, we sometimes are trying to figure out how to respond, I think. And so I totally appreciate that comment about, just being able to listen enthusiastically. Because sometimes, like even for myself, I can say sometimes all I need is for someone to listen to me. And, that's, I'm not necessarily even looking for solutions from someone else, just, being able to be listened to, I think is such an important aspect of the work that we do. So with these declarations and affirmations, what we wanted to do is to kind of engage in that, really in that active and enthusiastic listening aspect of it. I think a lot of the students have already shared some of the concerns, some of the things that they would want. And this exercise is meant, and this is the first time we're doing it in this environment, in this remote environment. So we'll see how that goes. But we usually do this around campus, around different offices, just to make sure that the students have a place where they can feel, they can voice their concerns. That's voice those concerns is really important, right? So being able to provide a space where someone can voice those concerns, those things that maybe are not making it that experience as good as it could be. I think that's important. And then the second part is for us as staff, as educators, as the ones that are upholding the institutions, whether we admit it or not, we're upholding the institution, is also to be able to listen and to offer an affirmation, something that that can constructively provide some next steps for ourselves, right? Whatever our position may be. So we're using this this website, and if I think, oh yeah, so Jen already dropped the link also in the chat. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to ask first our students, any of our students who are here, to share with us any declarations, anything that you feel that will help you either at the community college or at the university at UC Santa Cruz, that will help you be more successful in your journey. And that success doesn't, again, we're not defining it just as you graduating from the campus. Of course, that's an important aspect of it. But also, just making that experience better for you, making that experience an experience that you can look back and say, I am glad that I went through that experience. I want others to go through that experience, because I think that's also really important. Things such as, as a transfer student, I don't want to hear an educator or a staff member say to me, class of 2024, because that implies that I came in as a freshman, right? So, it can be just something as small as that. And even though I don't think it's small, I think it's important when, we use that type of language. Or, things such as, as a parenting student, I do want more resources that are easy to navigate as well. So if you as a student, we're going to start with you, and we're going to ask you to do some declarations. You can either go to the website, and we're going to activate this, and we're going to start showing some responses. So hopefully we have some of those at this point. Okay, here we go. Okay, so hopefully, and let us know if it's not working. Okay, good. A clear path to feel welcome. Really good. Okay. To be acknowledged as a scholar, that's a really good one. I think that's such an important one too. We'll wait a few more minutes. And again, this exercise for us to kind of think about, what are the ways in which we're not affirming our students, and what are the ways in which we could potentially do better, right? So for students, again, I think this is an opportunity to be able to safely voice those and I feel, again, that you're being looked at as a burden, because I think that's the other part. I think I heard someone mention as well that sometimes when transfer students or when any student voices a challenge they may be going through, that they feel like they're a burden, that they feel like they're bringing someone else with their concerns. And this is not what this, I mean, I think as someone else mentioned, for students of color to ask for help sometimes can be a very difficult thing as well. So being able to voice these opinions is really important as well. All right, so we have a few of those here. So again, to be acknowledged as a scholar, to feel welcome. I think, I think if you can, as staff members now, we can start thinking about what are the things that we can do potentially to create a welcoming space, to create a space where our transfer students feel like they're the scholars, just like everyone else on the campus, to have a clear pathway. Those are the things that we are, that keep those in mind as we now move to ask staff members now to maybe do some affirmations as well. Okay, so for staff, faculty, the affirmations is after listening. Again, I love what Science said about this. Listening enthusiastically is an important aspect of this. Listening not because we have to listen, but because we want to listen. I think that's really, I know that for me, that's so important, right? To be able to, because I love what I do. I love hearing from the students what they have to say. This is the most important aspect of the work that I do. So, and then to think about in which ways can we affirm, can we support, or can we create a receptive culture, whether that is on the whole campus or a transfer setting culture if you're at a community college. What is it that you could, as a staff person, as a faculty, as administrator, can you do to create that type of space? And again, that could be institutionally, it could be in your office, it can be in just your daily day-to-day activities on things that you could do to create that type of space where students are going to feel welcome. They're going to feel as if they're scholars. They're being given that opportunity to thrive and to succeed, and to do it in a way that is going to be both equity minded and culturally affirming as well. So we're gonna do this one, and we're gonna activate it. Let's see how that one works. So this is again for, and you can do the same thing. Just send your responses here. And I'll give some time for folks to do that.
Santi, we've been getting a few messages about technical difficulties in the chat. So if you're not able to use the link, feel free to put in your answers in the chat.
Yeah,
and
that's
you can
perfectly fine.
Yeah, and you can message us directly if you'd like to be anonymous, and then we can read them out loud as well.
Thank you for that. I didn't realize that was going on. So
yeah.
Yes, please. If for whatever reason you're unable to do it on the on the poll, just go ahead and let's do it here on the chat. I think that would be great too. Holding leadership accountable for action, or like that's truly an important aspect of the work that we do. Advocacy, right? Advocacy is so much of what we need to do. And again, if I can bring up Alfred's example of that advocacy, when no one was talking about transfers in our campus, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, he was that squeaky wheel. He was the one that was, what about transfers? What about transfers? Like, I remember going to meetings with him, and when that transfer, when we were talking about any type of issue and that transfer, there were two things he would always bring up: transfer students and undocumented students. And I just remember distinctly people always responding, to his advocacy, because again, being able to advocate, we're in positions where we know where we can advocate for students in whichever way we can, right? So I think that's also really important. Dimple, if you don't mind, like maybe reading some of the ones in the chat because I can see it.
Of course, yes. We have some great responses in the chat. Someone said centering in students' experiences and meeting students where they're at. It's important to have people who can actually help, provide a place for students to meet and find support, be an active listener and advocate for our students, create more listening opportunities for myself with transfer students.
These are really great ones. And again, I think the point of this exercise is not to like say, oh, we're going to be able to change everything. I mean, I think sometimes it's just in those little steps that we can take, you know, those little things that we can take that really make a whole difference. I do remember when we had this exercise with our academic advancement program, there were some of our staff were saying just, you know, putting up a sign in my office saying transfer students welcome, you know, that like just that in itself says so much, right? Because naming the students that we are advocating for is so important as well, right? And then someone else said, you know, I mean, that was like a very doable activity. And then someone else from in the staff said, we're going to hire a graduate mentor who is going to be specifically assigned to transfer students. Again, that was like, wow, that's like, you know, so amazing that from that interaction, we had someone who could put up a sign, and then for someone to say commit to hiring a graduate mentor for transfer students, because as you all have heard, the limited time that students have, right? It's important for those who are taking that graduate pathway, you know, when we talk about moving students beyond, right, whether they're going to go directly into the workforce or going to take the graduate school, is going to be different for transfer students. And we need to think about, well, how is this going to be different? How can we make that process of moving out from undergrad a less anxiety-filled process, right? I mean, I think we heard from a number of the students today talking about, you know, just what that's going to look like, particularly right now in the time that we're in this environment. So I think, you know, definitely those are the things that we're looking for.
Dimple, can you read more?
Yes, of course. There's a few great messages here. I think a theme that's popping up are rather than us trying to find students, us going to students first, right? Rather than students seeking us out, we're going to seek students. An example of that is it's important not to expect students to always come to us, but to make the extra effort to seek them out as well. I think it's important to engage with potential students before they can even get to campus, build those relationships, show them that they'll be supported even before they get here. There was another statement earlier regarding teaching students to speak up, being intentional about asking transfer students about their experience, how their transfer experience has been while in meetings. Someone had a really explicit commitment saying, I'll advocate for more support for transfer students by making my divisional leaders aware of the needs expressed and coming up with action items to focus and ask for support.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Those are great. I mean, I think again, when we make those commitments, I think that says so much already. You know, that already like is doing a lot of the work right there. I think. And I was going to say something else, and I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, that in this process as well, I think one of the things that I do always talk with my colleagues about is not to always think of our students as problems, right? That need to be solved, because I think when we do that, also we tend to reduce the students into just this one dimension that they're a challenge, right? As opposed to, then it's not that they're the challenge, it's that the institution has been a challenge for them, right? And that it's not the students that that are quote unquote broken, but the institution itself and the systems we have created are the ones that are broken. And that's, so we need to focus away from, you know, that sometimes the mentality of like, you know, what can I do so that this student learns these different things, as opposed to how can we ensure that these things are already part of the culture that brings students in, right? So, you know, again, just being mindful of that we don't want to, we don't always want to think of our students as a challenge, or as they having problems, but as how were those problems created to begin with, and address the root of those problems as well. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Santi. I'm going to read just a couple more, and then I think we can transition.
Yeah.
One is from a student saying that they really appreciated an event that happened on campus. It was a barbecue for transfer students, and they felt that they were recognized as having an individual identity apart from freshmen and continuing students who didn't transfer, and that within that event they could mingle and build community. Another student shared that they would like to be seen as a person, not just a number, and have staff and faculty take a holistic approach to education instead of the traditional approach. I think that's right along what you were just saying. And another really specific example that just popped up is a course that's being currently coordinated. That's an articulation project for their department to articulate as many of classes as possible. So great responses. Thank you everyone who's contributed, if you're able to in the poll or here in the chat.
Yes, and maybe hopefully, and I don't know if this is possible, but you know, if you can, if the organizers can save the chat to, like, you know, keep this list of both concerns and commitments, you know, alive, and as maybe as a guiding document as well for future discussions. I think that would be great too as well.
Yeah,
because I think that, again, you know, being able to is as Zion said, I mean, Zion can do the workshop for us, by the way.
Yeah, Zion, you are hired.
Yeah. I mean, she said that we needed to listen enthusiastically, but then we needed action, right? So I think the next part of this is what is going to be the action on these things? What is going to be the follow-up on these things? So I'll stop right there. I want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here with you today, and I'll pass it on.
Great. Okay, so the question of what's next and where are we going from here, because we are not all about just having a fun event and then, but we have to mobilize ourselves and move forward to improve the transfer of color, students of color experience. Valeria, you were going to share a little bit about a research project that we're working on.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So throughout the school year, we are engaging in 3 projects to take stock of UCSC's progress in meeting transfer equity goals and determining the next steps for institutional responsiveness to better serve transfer students of color. So Sarah, myself, and Dr. Saskia Casanova have been working on the first project, which is evaluating transfer receptivity at UCSC. This project asks which policies and practices foster a transfer receptive culture at UCSC, what are the campus policies and practices that may create barriers for community college transfer students of color, and also what are the campus policies or practices that may create opportunities for community college transfer students of color. And lastly, we ask how are transfer students' outcomes different across race and ethnicity? So to answer these questions, a survey would be sent out next week for UCSC staff members, and later on the quarter, we'll be sent out a survey for students. Your expertise, both students and staff members, and knowledge would be essential to really compile an expansive understanding of how UCSC is serving transfer students of color, and also identifying where we have room for improvement as we work as a campus. So we really encourage staff and students to complete the survey once it's sent out. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me or Sarah. And then I'm gonna pass it on to Sarah for the to talk more about project number 3.
Yeah, so we don't just collect data to collect data, but we collect data to make it actionable and to advance our project of creating more racial equity on our campus. So later on this winter quarter, I will be doing a call for folks to join Transfer Champions work group. And that's the group that's going to be looking at the data that we've been collecting, reflecting on this event and what happened today and some of the great recommendations we heard from students, from our leadership, and from those of you faculty, staff, and students in the audience. We're going to make sense of it. We're going to start thinking about what we can possibly do with this data. And at the end of the day, we'll start working on potential grant applications, perhaps the next, a future HSI application or other work that we can be doing as a campus and how to actually mobilize and do that work. So that's what's coming up, and also just really want to underscore the commitment from our campus to sustain our work with Cultivamos Excelencia. I know many of the UC leadership had to leave right at 3, so you saw them leave, and it's not because they didn't care, they didn't want to be here, it's because they're busy and they had another meeting to go to, but they have made a financial investment in continuing our work and continuing the partnership between San Jose City College and UC Santa Cruz. And I know that the San Jose City College is also really invested in continuing this partnership with us. So I am going to pass it off to Alfred, who's going to give you a little highlight of what mapping transfer-receptive culture is going to look like as we move forward.
So the next 2 slides, which is a transfer sending culture and the transfer receiving culture landscape, is really an opportunity for you to engage in checking things out on your own campuses. One of the things that we talk about, and of course Zion mentioned it too, is there needs to be a lot of different places on this campus, whether it's the community college or the 4-year, that provide the support and guidance for students. It shouldn't be the Transfer Student Center alone at San Jose City College, but it should be a classroom. It should be the writing center. It should be the president's office. It should be all different places, because transfer is a responsibility of everybody. It's not the responsibility of a person or an office solely, but it is important for everyone to be engaged in it at whatever level they're able to. So one of the things that we've developed is this 2 things. One of them is this mapping project, which gives you the opportunity to sit down and think about all of those places that you as a student or you as a staff or administrator know to be transfer friendly, transfer specific, and looking at what we call a transfer hotspot. So this is really the place where it all happens. This is really an important part of that. The other part of it is transfer-friendly places. They're not really focused only on transfer, but they really encourage transfer students to come in, and they participate in a number of activities that will help support transfer students. And then places that must be. And one of the examples we always get is financial aid must be transfer-friendly, but it's not always. So looking at those places on campus that don't do anything or do much of anything to really embrace transfer students, but really should be. And so this gives you the opportunity to kind of map out on your own campus where you find these 3 different elements of a transfer receptive culture. You will have access to this in the website, so you can do that. We are planning on doing a 3rd session or another session in the spring, and it's going to be more action oriented. So it's going to take these pieces of information that you collect and putting it into an action strategy plan for how you make the difference in your institution, whether it be a very small piece or a very large piece, but every one of those pieces is critical to changing the culture on that campus. Next slide. And they're pretty similar in that. Sarah.
All right, well, I just want to once again, my video. Thank you all for being here and participating. There are so many people to thank for putting on this presentation today. So much appreciation and so much gratitude to our guest facilitators, Dimpal Jain, Alfred Herrera, Santiago Bernal, and Paulina Palomino. I have so much gratitude for Dr. Elizabeth Gonzalez, who isn't here today, but has been a huge partner and a huge influence on all of this work that you've seen here today. Has worked both at the SJCC side and the UC Santa Cruz side. So much gratitude to you, Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you to all of our dialogue participants, President Tomanang, SJCC VP Student Affairs Montemayor, UCSC Chancellor Larive, UCSC Campus Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor Kletzer, UCSC Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs and Success, Basile, Joshua Solis, Natalie Espinosa, Zion Tunstall, Jasmine Lara, and Sheriel Paz. Big ups and thank yous to our tech crew, Janet Seha, who's been working the chat, and Valeria, who has also been screen sharing and working behind the scenes, helping y'all troubleshoot all the tech issues. Someone who's been really awesome and helpful is Mike Cromwell from ITS, helped me set up my first webinar here through Zoom, so have a lot of appreciation for him. Thank you to our SJCC colleagues, Sabrina Hagman, Claudia Barajas, and Claudia Amador. This never would have happened without you. And much gratitude to our UCSC colleagues, Sharis Herzan, Lydia Zendejas, Maria Fernanda Alcantara, Deshaun Keller. You've all helped make this happen today. And in closing, I really just want to acknowledge and recognize the Cultivamos team members of past and present, who there's no way we'd be where we are today without them. Pablo Regarin, Eric Ramirez, Rihanna Howard, and Robert Gutierrez. Thank you so much. And on that note, I hope y'all have a great Friday. I think it's time for us all to transition. I hope you're not doing too many emails or schoolwork this evening. I know I'll be celebrating. Any last words or thanks from our facilitators?
I just want to say, first of all, happy birthday, Paulina.
Yay!
Being able to spend her birthday with us is a treat for all of us, but also to all of you for your patience, for your support, for your guidance, for your comments, for your insightful thoughts about where you are on this transfer trajectory, whether you're a student or faculty, staff, administrator. All of us need to do more and better at what we do in whatever way we can. And it takes all of us, not just one of us. So from UCLA CCCP, we do amazing work. It's great work. We love the work and we know it's critical and important. And we're happy to continue to share as well. So thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity to spend some time with you. And Carol, I didn't acknowledge you earlier, but it's great to see or read your comments because I can't see you as well. Dimpal?
Yes, thank you, everyone. The chat also says Paulina's birthday present is that it's Alfred's birthday tomorrow as well. So happy early birthday, Alfred. Sarah, I wanted to thank you for all the organization that you did to put this together, including, helping me understand more about Google Drive and also the tech resources that you put together and getting the leadership to show up and to be present. I know that was a lot of your initiative. So thank you so much for your kind of leading the charge here. We are saving the chat. We are saving questions. So if we didn't have time to get to yours, this is the teaser trailer. Come back for part 3, where we'll actually like get in the nitty gritty of things and we'll be able to engage more directly with you. So thank you.
I also want to just say thank you again to everyone. I mean, I think everyone's pretty much said it. Happy birthday, Paulina. Happy birthday, Alfred. Hope you take the time to celebrate yourselves. It's important to celebrate ourselves. And Sarah, again, thank you. And Elizabeth, she's not here, but I also want to acknowledge both of your work. So important, and I can see the importance of your presence just on this campus is so needed. So thank you for doing this work. You know, I remember meeting you, I think maybe about 2 years ago when you came to UCLA, and we had such a great conversations around you know, around the campus. And so I look forward to more of these conversations. I look forward to more of these collaborations because, you know, in this process I know I am learning as well so much just from all this work that you're all doing over here on this side, and I you know, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that as well. So I look forward to those collaborations. I look forward to seeing everyone, and you know, we can add some of those questions to the website too, so that we can kind of keep track of those as well. So it's a living document. So thank you so much, everyone.
Paulina?
All right, well, on behalf of East LA College, I so appreciate having the opportunity to come forward and share some of the work that we've done. And we've partnered with, of course, our amazing partners at UCLA, UCLA TRC team. Thank you for making sure that the community college voice is connected, because it's key and instrumental. And Sarah, your opening made me want to cry. I loved it. And in fact, I know this is being recorded. I want to hear it again. And there's nothing better that I can think of doing today on my birthday is you know, being a part of this team and sharing the work, and really most of all, hearing the voices, the courageous voices of our students. So many times we get caught up in working toward improving our institutional practices. And even though our goal is to work and create things that are holistic and meet the needs of all students, we need to be reminded of what those needs are. And so thank you again. And of course, Elizabeth, we missed Elizabeth. I mean, I know she was here, right? But she started on this journey with us, and she was my community college partnership. So I'm glad she was able to join us today. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Sarah and team.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it so much. Valeria, did you have anything you wanted to add, or any closing remarks or anything?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for showing up. You know, it was staff, it was faculty, it was students, both from SJCC and UCSC. And I think that's really important, right? It shows that both campuses and everybody within both campuses is committed to this. And I'm really looking forward to the work that we're going to continue doing. Again, please, if you get the student or the staff survey, we would really appreciate your insight. It would help us continue to do this work. And I just want to say thank you to our speakers and our facilitators. And as always, Elizabeth Gonzalez. She brought me in the team 3 years ago, and it's been amazing ever since.
All right. First thing I did when I got my job as STARS director is my boss, Pablo Regarin, sent me to UCLA to meet with this crew and said, this is a model. This is something that you want to pick up off. And I remember when I was there, it was so heartwarming. There were students, everyone was together. We were eating a meal, and I looked around and I thought, wow, this really feels like a family. This is exactly what I want for us at STARS. This is exactly what I want for UCSC. And it's been so amazing to see community build, family build around this. So thanks for showing us how to do this work with heart, with treating people like individuals, like humans, and as they are our own family members. So thank you for the inspiration. Thank you everyone for being a part of this movement with us. And we will see you in another Zoom room on Monday. Take care, everyone.